Next up, we have another highlight of today, the IMGL Masterclass with Dr. Jörg Hofmann, who needs no introduction because you already met him. And Jörg is being joined here today by Birgitte, former Director General of the Danish Gambling Regulator, responsible gambling expert Pieter Remmers, who is Secretary General of the European Association for the Study of Gambling. And their discussion will be moderated by Pieter de Goeij, Director of the Dutch Online Gambling Trade Association, NOGA. Please make your way to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Willem, for organizing this conference in these hard times and special circumstances. I'm really happy to see everyone here. The panel is already introduced to you, I'd like to give you a sense of what we will be discussing in the coming small hour. At the end of the panel discussion, there will be room to ask questions. So if you have any questions bubbling up, please use the Slido app and list the questions there. And the questions that get voted up will be posed to the panel. So obviously we will be looking at the Glücksspielneuregulierungsstaatsvertrag. I really practiced this one, as you can tell. And the transitional regime, and we will be zooming in on three main questions. So the first question is, what is your take on the most recent events in Germany? What are we heading to, and what should we expect? The second question we will be addressing is, what is your advice to policymakers and authorities? What are the pitfalls? And the third one is, what are the 5 key points to get ready before July 1st next year? Now, we have a panel filled with veterans on this podium, and I would like to ask the first question to Pieter. With your background in responsible gambling, how have you been watching the German re-regulation from afar?
Okay, good question. Good question. That's what I have to say, so I can think for another 10 seconds. Well, honestly, it surprised me at a certain stage, if you look at Europe, that there were a few countries that had not arranged any regulation so far. And the 3 main countries in this area were the Netherlands, of course, Germany and Sweden, because they were always late. And there was a discussion a couple of years ago saying, oh, but that has to do with the fact that those 3 countries in Europe take most of the refugees that are coming to Europe, so to say. Anyway, going to Germany, the question always was, who is going to be the very last one? Is it Germany or the Netherlands? What you do see, well, maybe very briefly. My best advice in this area would be, and that's what Germans are good at, regulations, don't over-regulate. So this is the starting point of what I would like to say in regard to Germany. If you look at responsible gambling in itself, if you look at treatment possibilities, treatment is very well organized in Germany, but the only thing is, to my opinion, it's organized in a very old-fashioned way, so to say. So I think there should be a lot of improvement related to the content of what should be offered as treatment in Germany in the future.
Do you think that the new treaty will bring this about?
Honestly, I don't think so. But that's a really honest answer. Because of how things are organized, it's very strict, very stable, very, like it has been for I don't know how many years, so to say. So no, I don't think there are going to be a lot of changes related to that.
So, Jörg, I was reading a post from Regulus Partners, and it's called Winning Post, and they were citing von Clausewitz, and they said the enemy of a good plan is the dream of a perfect plan, when they were talking about the German re-regulation. Do you agree?
Well, it sounds really good, but where's the perfect plan we're dreaming of in this particular regard here? I mean, we have to consider where we are coming from. German gambling regulation comes from a total internet ban, meaning we don't want online casinos, online gaming. That is the attitude of the past. It may have changed, but this regulation, this piece of regulation we're now discussing, the two interstate treaties, including the transitional regimes, to me, it looks like it's very close to where we come from, because it's not really allowing the industry to start through. It's not allowing the authorities to really apply player and consumer protection the way it could be in the ideal, in the perfect world, because it's more designed still to kill parts of the industry. If there were no black market in Germany and no non-compliant operators, then the theoretical discussion of a prohibition might be fine if you think that's the best way to protect players. I don't think so. But there is black market, and there will always be black market. And so far, this sort of channeling is going into the opposite direction. It's like driving on the Autobahn in Germany to the wrong direction. You're the only one. We call it ghost driving, you know.
That sounds frightening. So you mentioned the channelization. Is it true that there is no target for channelization in the German regulation?
You mean that regulation, the tools of regulation, do not provide any specific targets, any specific measures against channeling into the wrong direction or against channeling from black market sites to licensed sites? Well, the idea behind the whole regulation is to create a licensed market and, of course, to transfer the traffic to that sites. But I think the way it is handled doesn't work, because it's the player who decides where he wants to play. And if he can't find what he wants, then we certainly consider going elsewhere. And if he knows I can win, I get my money, he don't care.
Yeah. So Birgitte, with your background coming from a highly successful regulated market from Denmark, and you having been on the side of the regulator, so looking at the market, so what do you see as major concerns in the German market?
Right. First of all, I have to say hello to all of you here. I'm so delighted to see so many people alive, so close. I feel like I've been in a prison for half a year. So great to see you all, and thank you for having me. First of all, I would say congratulations to Germany. I think it's a huge, great news to all of us, actually, that we finally got Germany regulating in a different way, I would say. And we, by that, I mean the EU, looking at the waiting for Sweden and then Holland, and then finally we got Germany in there. And what I mean by that, when I think of it like a regulator, the more the merrier. I mean, we have to stand shoulder by shoulder if we want to keep the bad guys out of the market. So definitely it's great news that Germany finally got to regulate more than they used to do when it comes to any market trying to get hold of German customers. So in that sense, I think it's great news. But I share the criticism or the skepticism from Jörg, saying that there are many more things that could be done if you want to have a high channelization. But looking at 12 years regulating the Danish market, it doesn't happen overnight. And you will never, ever strike perfect in the first go, or even in the third treaty either. I believe that it takes some time, and instead of sort of like thinking any more about it and discussing any more about details, I think it's still great news that now at least there's something out there, and then it's very much about how you deal with that you have been given now. So where do you go from here? And there's a lot of buts, but we can get back to that.
Yeah, so I remember that you once spoke about, a ghost in the room. Maybe you want to explain a little bit what you mean with that.
Well, I would say that it's very much about, when you are a regulator, you have to make a lot of choices all the time because you never get the resources and the budget you dream for. So you have to consider whether you want to spend your time in court or you want to spend your time answering questions from operators. As simple as that, really. So at the end of the day, do you want to spend time making guidelines, drawing up details, trying to get the minister to understand that you need a little bit more on this and that to make it perfect? Or do you want to spend time doing endlessly discussions in court or just outside court? So a lot of the time you really have to consider to find the right balance to get the results the politicians are actually looking for. So in my view, it's highly important to sort of like get the ghost out, have a look at it, and not be afraid as a regulator to take some decisions and get into details and get into a closer talk with advisors, lawyers, and indeed industry themselves. And as you are yourself, representing the trades. So really not be afraid of actually confronting industry or even talk to industry in a good way and find out the necessary details and disclose if there's any misunderstandings, instead of striking down very hard from day one, will, in my view, bring a lot of hardship along, and you will spend your resources perhaps in the wrong way at the end of the day.
Yeah, so we're 8 months away from the new treaty coming into force, right? And as I understand it, the authority has not been established yet?
No, it has been decided that there will be built up a new authority, a centralized body, which is a common supervisory authority, and it should be located in the state of Saxony-Anhalt, I think in Halle. And it's estimated that it needs about 1.5 years to build that up. So when the new interstate treaty comes in force, probably we have another extension of the transitional regime until this authority takes over. But maybe like this, it's good that there is one centralized body. The only point I have to mention is, I wish that this body would have more power to make decisions. It's the same with the sports betting application. There's a wonderful authority in Hesse, in Darmstadt, putting every effort on progressing these applications speedily, but they always have to listen to the gambling committee if they want to make any decisions. And if you have 16 decision makers from 16 German lenders, it may be good or it may be not good, but it's complicated. And so that's the issue of getting majority votes within such gremium. Yeah. It's always better you have one body full of competence and power.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it depends, honestly, it depends a little bit how things are being organized, I would
That's
say.
it.
Yeah.
Because, as everyone knows, this is a very complicated country with all these 16 lenders who all want to make their own decision. I mean, I'm very much in favor of a central organization and a central regulator, so to say, who has to be active and flexible, so to say. That's probably what you try to do in Denmark. And you need a proactive industry, because that's the other part of the story, because a lot of industry at this very moment is just waiting to hear what they are supposed to do, so to say. So you have to be proactive. And as an authority, as a national authority, of which I'm very much in favor, definitely here in Germany, you have to be active and flexible. And that's a real challenge.
Yeah. So going back to the, let's say, the draft treaty and the transitional regime, Pieter, this will be a question to you. A lot of the measures seems to be aimed at preventing gambling addiction.
Yeah.
Now, I don't have a clue, but do you know how much, how many people are suffering from gambling addiction in Germany?
Well, honestly, if you let me say something about Europe first, because there's not a lot of differences between all those different countries. Usually, on the average, we say it's between 0.5 and 2% of all the people in any country who has a problem with gambling. So let's take it easy. I think in Germany it's 0.78, something like that.
So less than 1%.
That's what the official figure said related to prevalence rates. Prevalence rates are almost the same in any country in Europe and outside of Europe as well. And they don't change a lot. So I don't know if you have followed that, but if you look at those figures, prevalence rates in the past 5, 10, 15, 20 years, they are about the same. 20 years ago, there was hardly any online gambling. So in fact, it meant that all those people that were addicted were land-based players, maybe to a certain extent lottery players. So if the prevalence rates are still the same, why online gambling has become big, even in this country where it was tolerated, so to say, to go online, that means that either less people are addicted by land-based gambling, so to say, which the land-based industry is very happy with, of course. Or maybe that's another thing I used to say is, maybe the problem isn't that big as we usually think it is. And I don't say it's not a problem, but maybe we are more able to control ourselves.
For me, I think that's a very, very interesting point taken, Pieter. If you consider it's roughly 1% or even below 1% of people who have a gambling problem or could be addicted, I mean, the main goal of regulation is consumer protection.
Yeah.
Not only fighting gambling addiction, that's part of it. Consumer protection, protection of vulnerable people, minors. So what about the other 99%? I think regulation needs to be more balanced of some kind. If it's too restrictive, that was your first suggestion to avoid it, then I think we waive the chance to establish better protection for the other 99 who don't have any problems with addiction, but probably need transparency, need to be protected against fraud, and need to find a competitive offer which meets their demands to play, that they keep staying in a supervised market. I think that's the formula we need to consider more and more in the future.
Yeah. Am I allowed?
Yes, please. Yes.
No, because that's one of the things. We usually take measures, and then let's say, okay, you're allowed to spend 1,000 euros now as a single operator, and then later blah, blah, blah. Well, I think all measures should be tailor-made. I mean, to compare this with marketing efforts that operators do, and I don't know if you know, but in the old days there was just a single marketing effort which was applicable for all players. Now everything is individualized, personalized. So you get your own personal offer. I think we should do the same related to problem gambling and responsible gaming, so to say. It has to be personalized, and the focus should not be on if there is a problem, because that's where they are very good at. Everyone knows all the telephone numbers of the treatment organizations, the Beratungsstelle, as they call them in Germany. Everyone knows the telephone number and know how to reach them. But we should turn it around. We should make prevention the new treatment, if you understand what I mean. So the focus should be in a different way, not try to identify people who have problems, not looking at prevalence rates, but we should look at the public health, more at the public health perspective, and try to keep our customers healthy, or the operators' customers healthy.
The politicians will say this is exactly what the treatment, or what the treaty is trying to reach, to sustain by these strict measures.
Yeah, but it's not just a matter of having strict measures. That's what I think. It's a matter of being flexible and focused on the individual customer and pay a lot of attention to them. I mean, and not in a way of that we try to find the 1% who do has a problem, because what Jörg says is very important as well. Let's look at those who are at the healthy customers, definitely, because, I mean, there's a healthy part in it as well, so to say. Yeah. So it's not only problematic.
Another ghost that you frequently see in European gambling markets, Birgitte, is the fear for the effects of online gambling advertising on addiction prevalence. So how did this go in Denmark when the market opened up? How did it work?
Well, from the very beginning, advertising wasn't that big an issue, really. We were so taken by the fact that we were liberalizing the market. So advertising itself was just something, of course it's allowed. You get into a liberalized market, you expect to be able to tell people about your products. So to both politicians and other and the experts, I should say, there weren't really that much discussion about it. It took years before we really got on with having a closer look at advertising regulation as such. And we had actually a splendid cooperation with the advertising authorities in Denmark. So we sort of shared the responsibility of taking care of customers and consumers. And if there was anything that I and my colleagues couldn't deal with within our legislation, we went to the advertising authorities and they took care of it more or less. So in that sense, it was a good balance. And obviously we needed the advertising to be out there to tell customers what was actually legally there. So we were really happy to see that as a tool to push away the grey market and actually keep customers dealing with only the good guys, as I like to call them. So really advertising not being banned was actually a great advantage, opening up the market. And I would still argue that to this day, we've seen a very high degree of channelization in the market. It took some years, but eventually we got there in Denmark. And part of it was really...
Sorry to interrupt. How high is it in Denmark, just so we have an understanding?
You know, it goes up and down between 92, 95, even 96, depending on how you calculate. But it's pretty high. But it won't stay like that if you do that. If you make that many changes. And one of the issues is really whether you dare to take down the advertising to such a degree that you actually ban it. So how can you be absolutely sure and convinced that consumers can make the right choices if they don't really see who's out there in sort of a way where they feel confident that at least these guys, since they are telling me about themselves, they must be legal somehow. That's the common sense of it. So if you discuss advertising from a more sort of like you try to limit it in any way, I believe you take some chances, and at least you need to know what to do to inform customers in another way then. So it puts a lot of pressure on regulation and legislation, really, to inform customers, to give them the right base to make healthy choices. So if you don't want advertising from legal licensees out there, you need to put something else in that place. So regulators have to get themselves into doing campaigns, or in another way, telling people how to deal with all the different offers out there. It's a complicated world, and you can't make lists of everything on the website from an authority. So it's quite complicated to deal with that if you don't take the help of, so to speak, the good guys.
Thank you. And Jörg, what is your thought? Is there enough clarity around marketing and advertising in the upcoming treaty?
Well, first of all, on our way to that upcoming treaty, the transitional regime, it is very easy to say that marketing or advertising is completely prohibited, which I think is not a really good idea, because also for the transitional regime, and if not now, when operators need to distinguish from those who are not compliant. Under the next interstate treaty, there's regulation for marketing, for advertising. There's watersheds, times where you're not allowed to broadcast your commercials on TV. There's detailed regulation. There's one kind of critical provision dealing with affiliate marketing. Affiliate marketing is not prohibited, but the commercial basis of affiliate marketing is heavily objected. It means that affiliate marketing cannot be based on a remuneration of a certain percentage of stakes, turnover, whatever it is, which is a concept of that market. So this is something that is very restrictive, but you can find a lot of things. For the first time, by the way, ever, advertising for online games of chance will be allowed. Today, we're receiving requests from the market. Do we need to change the remuneration of our affiliates not to become illegal? So you already are illegal, because there's an advertising ban saying, it's section 5 of the interstate treaty, saying advertising and sponsorship for marketing for illegal games of chance is illegal, is prohibited. And there are things to clarify.
So are you basically pleading to open up this, or to take away this ban in the run-up to the treaty during the transitional period?
I think it's good to regulate it, and also that marketing needs to seek approval with the district government in Düsseldorf, the responsible authority for approving, pre-approval of marketing campaigns and advertisings. But I think marketing is also information. And in an environment where you have competitors who are not licensed, it's very important that it's not too restrictive. Because in the end, we all want to meet and target these players to have them played in the protected sites.
Yeah, agreed.
Can I add something
Please.
to the advertising thing?
Please.
Because have you ever heard of Perbinde, who is a professor at the University of Gothenburg? He puts in a lot of efforts in checking all the research which is being carried out on the advertising thing. So Google Perbinde, Gothenburg, and you will find, it's for free. You can find everything he wrote about it. And in fact, what he says, in short, is that the effect of advertising is rather limited. There are two exceptions. If you focus on young people, the vulnerable ones, or those who have developed the problem already. And most of all the others, it has hardly any effect on them, so to say. So what you should do, if you want to take specific measures, is that you take the things that you know into account, which means don't focus on young people in general, which could mean something for the companies, the operators on the jerseys of the UK football players, or when I was in the Mercure Spiel Arena in Düsseldorf last year, when it was still allowed to go there, I saw signs telling me, I'm not going to mention the name of the company, but I think this was a not regulated online company that was promoting their activities. So that's what you should focus on. And honestly, Perbinde doesn't stand alone in his thoughts. He is very much supported by Jonathan Park, who is another famous researcher, and Alex Basinski, who is the most famous one coming from Sydney in Australia. And they all agree on the little effect that advertising in general has.
Yeah. Birgitte.
I could perhaps add, to me it has been sort of like looking at the 12 years as regulator, you have this game of cat and mouse in the sense. So you start off, everybody is hoping and believing the very best for everyone. And then you sort of test each other, whether it's allowed or could be allowed, or whether it's found out or not, whatever you're doing in the market. And so it goes with advertising as well. So from the beginning, I was wondering why the operators weren't bragging about how they took care of their consumers, how they took care of the players. And nowadays, when I listen to a Danish advert, it takes like ages to listen to all those requirements that I myself and my colleagues were part of deciding. So now they have to inform you about play responsible, remember to this and that, don't spend too long time, don't spend money you haven't got, and remember you have to be 18. And so it takes actually quite a long time before they get to the actual product and to tell anything about that. So for me now, when I look back, why didn't operators themselves much earlier on decide to actually brag about that they care about their consumers? I think they took for granted that we all knew that. But I think it's important in times like these for industry to really brag about if they have the goodwill, so that you spend less time doing all the regulation around it. So if we have seen perhaps a little bit more information and caring and showing off on that part early on, we might have had less restrictions on advertising and less requirements coming sort of like in a more tough way. So I'm just saying code of conduct might be a good way to go, but if they come too late, they're less useful. So really, it's about perhaps making sure that the politicians don't make less informed choices, that they know what they're doing and what they're deciding and what will happen when they do this and that. And somebody needs to tell them that before they make requirements that aren't really effective and realistic and fair. So it's very much about actually everybody working together. So my worst fears for the German market would be if not all stakeholders listen to each other actually and exchange worries and ideas at a very early stage. And for this, I congratulate Germany, because now is time to really find the perfect balance and pick and choose between all the experiences out there from the European Union in particular. So reach out and pick and choose the very best from everyone. I think if anyone can do that, I believe that Germany would be absolutely splendid once they decide to do it. I think if they put their head to it, it will happen. So to me, the choice will really be whether the lender have the opportunities and the will and the power to really work together to find common standards, to find a way to do this in a way where you don't confuse consumers, where you don't confuse industry. And at the same time, the federal level will get their act together and get an authority in place that also have the very best opportunities. So it's very much about getting a little bit ahead instead of sort of like getting yourself into banning anything at a later stage.
Yeah, you're basically saying to the operators, own your product, take responsibility, and come up with self-regulation.
Yes.
You know, even when there's no legal requirement to do so.
And also asking authorities to listen.
Yeah.
Well, maybe go a bit into detail. I don't know if bonuses are allowed in the new system in Germany. Are they?
They are not prohibited, literally, but they will be restricted. In sports betting licenses, you find a requirement that bonuses are limited to 100 euros per player per year.
Okay.
Maybe per bet it's 10.
Well, that's in any case a bit more than in Sweden, where it's only 100 Swedish krona at this very moment, as far as I understand, which is 10 euros. No, I asked the question because all of a sudden, at a certain stage, bonus systems came in. And honestly, I don't know if you've ever tried them, but there were systems where you had to use the money at least 35 times before you were allowed to withdraw the money again, which in fact meant you probably lost more than you ever won, so to say. So, and now you have things they call cash back, which is in fact a kind of bonus system as well, because you can just place your bet and you haven't lost your money, so to say. So I think these are things that are very important to look at, what is allowed and what is not allowed, so to say. I'm not against bonuses. I mean, when I go to my supermarket, I have a bonus card, which means I get another product for free. So I get 2 instead of 1. But that's a different bonus than this bonus where you have to earn. I don't know. I don't think you even earn. I mean, at 35 times is 1. There were others where you even had to play more than 35 times. So these are things we have to look at and restrict them to a certain extent, but not forbid at all times, so to say.
So I think we're going to head towards the hopes for the future, the 5 key things to get done before the 1st of July next year, and that can be for regulators, that can be for operators, but also for politicians maybe, policymakers. Jörg?
If I may start, I will focus the authorities who are responsible applying these new regulations. And I think the regulation is set in stone. The interstate treaty is decided for a couple of years, if nothing else happens. But the way we apply it, the way we practice enforcement, I think that is what counts now. I think it's the time to make experience on both sides, the industry and the regulators, to learn from each other and to learn how you can trust the industry and how not, or who not, which I think is the same with Denmark 11 years ago, but you did it, you learned it, and you see there's a dialogue, a level of dialogue that works. That takes time. I think this is the way to go to build a level of trust, which is not really there at the moment, but it can. This is IMGL panel. I mean, this IMGL stands for International Masters of Gaming Law.
I should have
It's
said that,
global. Yeah. It's leading gaming legal experts, regulators, united, exchanging knowledge. Why don't we learn from do's and don'ts of others? If we reserve the right to learn from our own don'ts, it's not the best idea. But I agree with you, it's a good start. I feel good seeing that there is a regulated market upcoming for Germany, and we can always improve it. And that's, I think, it's just the way we go.
That's very good. And I heard Dr. Tilman Becker say that he expects there to be a lot of litigation as a result of this. Do you agree? Or?
Unfortunately, I think this will be the case because there are so many vulnerable and really unclear provisions. And my example with the dualism of a state monopoly and a free market entry for the online casino license is one of these examples. Yeah. Why are we doing this? I mean, that's a provocation, and some operators might take this as a chance to challenge the whole thing. And this will cause delays and further uncertainty. I think what the industry needs is certainty.
Mm-hmm. There are operators out there that decided to take the leap of faith. I'm not going to mention any names, but you know, there are operators out there, big operators, that say, well, glass is half full. So yeah, let's hope and let's hope that, you know.
Yes, but at least it is half full. Last year it was empty.
Yeah. Birgitte?
Well, I pretty much said, you know, really it has always been my preferred way of doing things, to have the dialogue before having the fight. And so also getting yourself into a huge market here with 16 lender, it's not an easy thing. So I think really, again, choosing your battles will be really number one priority. And of course you have to give also the politicians so much that at least they got themselves in there now. It has been decided to move on, which is great in itself. But from now on, it's very much about getting organized. And I would just actually say what Jörg already has mentioned, that really it's about also giving guidelines to industry. It's quite difficult to be compliant if you don't know exactly what the requirements are. And nobody knows the answers to everything. And the regulators surely do not either. It's new to everyone, much of it. So really, you need to find out what to prioritize. And be clear about it. And to me, there's no shame in giving some months or half years to get things right. If the alternative would be that you miss out on giving licenses to someone out there that could actually have been a legal operator in the market, pushing away the bad guys. So it's very much about also taking up the prioritization with politicians, saying, from me as a regulator, you can expect this and that, but we can't overcome this and that right now. Are you okay with that? Is it okay that we focus on legal matters and not the technical matters and so forth? So it's very much about taking charge of what you can actually do and find out your powers. So being 16 lender, I would also argue that it must be a great thing to have 15 colleagues to talk to, and the federal authority as well. And on the other hand, if you don't, it must be quite horrible to be on your own there, not knowing what the 15 others are doing. They're probably doing different if you don't exchange. So to me, it would really be very much about being coordinated, having more or less the same prioritization about things. Otherwise, you really confuse the market and you confuse consumers. And it would do no good except for the illegal operators.
So outside federal cooperation, would you also suggest to the newly to be set up authority to go to their fellow authorities in Europe? And
very much so, and I mean, Jörg said it, globally as well. Because really, I believe that most of us in this room just proves that we've learned that not all can be found within your own jurisdiction. You know, you have to look for guidance and wisdom elsewhere as well. So I would argue not just Europe, but really more globally, looking for the people knowing, and it might be lawyers at the end of the world. So really it's about picking and choosing the best people for the job, and realizing that you can't know everything when you get yourself into this complicated new regime. So really looking for advice outside your own border and outside your own lender would really be my recommendation, obviously. But having said that as well, we all know culture can be very regional, very local. So you have to respect that as well.
Yeah, thank you. Pieter?
Well, honestly, Birgitte's last point was my second one,
related
to the regulator saying, I mean, I think all these 16 lenders have to realize there's a bigger task. So, and that is the federal gambling authority that has to be established. So that's what they should focus on. And because the first one was stick to the date. Very practical. Just do what you think you are going to do and just do it.
And I'm
don't try to
I'm wondering why you are saying this.
I mean, that has to do a bit with the Netherlands as well, related to all. I mean, we've been very late anyway. And then I have two other things which are a kind of mission impossible, I would say, because I think we should focus more on research, and I will probably talk a little bit later when I talk to Michael Auer about these things related to research, evidence-based best practices and things like that, and treatment, new forms of treatment or prevention, as I just tried to mention. But that takes more time than just 8-9 months, something like that. It's a long ongoing process. And I have one advice for the politicians, so to say. If I'm very careful and nice, I would say try to listen to experts, people who know what they're talking about, and keep that in mind, because I think that's the most important thing you need in Germany and in a lot of other countries, to be honest, as well, at this very moment.
Yeah, so as a conclusion, I would like to add to this that when the first time I was looking at Germany and the German gambling market, this was 2013, and in the Netherlands we were about to adopt a new law, and we were going to win from Germany in being regulated first. And now this situation reminds me of 1974. We're being kicked in the butt in the final, because next year...
It's a bit like football.
Exactly, yes.
At the end, the Germans always win.
Exactly. And on that positive note, ladies and gentlemen, the floor is open for questions.
Yes, you can ask the questions today here in person, or you can add them to the Slido app. We already saw some questions coming in on Slido, but again, if you have a question in the room, please raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you. So for the panelists here, you see the questions in front of you as well, so you don't have to watch behind you, but the people... so let's start with, I think there's a bunch of questions, and I think it was super interesting to hear all your perspective on things, and I think most of these questions go a little bit deeper into that. We have Dennis here asking, many affiliate sites have the word casino in the domain and brand name and are targeting keywords like online casino. Will this become a problem? I guess, Jörg.
The answer is yes, unfortunately, because it's prohibited to use the term casino and casino games for operating and promoting games of chance.
Yeah, let's do another practical question, a quick one. Dr. Hofmann, could the casino TV and internet advertising ban from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. also affect affiliate sites in the treaty from 2021 onwards?
If affiliates should be linked to the TV commercials, certainly, but I do not understand how. It's a comprehensive prohibition or regulation which applies to all forms of promotion and advertising. So if an affiliate would advertise on TV, that would be a problem as well, if that is the question. I don't understand the question.
Great, and then there will be other opportunities, I guess, to look this. Does the panel think the regulators are listening to the industry? What do you think? From your perspective, when you were a regulator, Birgitte?
Well, I felt that we were seen, heard, and listened to. And I felt that I obviously also were listening to industry. Actually, we listened for almost a year and a half, almost 2 years before we sat down and wrote the legislation together with the colleagues of the ministry. And so we got great information, great points of views from industry actually doing that. And we avoided a lot of pitfalls afterwards doing that as well. And when we got out there with the new legislation, it was really, really helpful to have these relationships in a very objective way settled already. So I think it's key that regulators should listen to industry, but keep it very objective. Be very much aware that everybody's watching you, and you need to be very, very fair at all times, especially when you're dealing with a situation like in Germany and in Denmark and many places in Europe where you still see state-owned companies out there. And you see state-owned companies doing both monopoly games and doing indeed also more liberalized games in the market. So that's a very interesting situation for many regulators to be in, and also for the operators themselves. So you have to really be delicate about listening to everyone and being open and fair when you do so. So I think in Germany they have all the right reasons to do so, and all the great experiences from everybody else to do so as well.
Thank you, Birgitte. Next question from an anonymous person. What would, maybe a short answer, because we will have more moments today to speak about advertising, but maybe quick from maybe two of the panelists. What would a sensible advertising regime look like? A very broad question. Pieter, Paul,
there are two things which are important. Don't focus on young people, don't focus on the vulnerable ones. That's in essence what it is about. Nothing more, nothing less.
And don't do too much.
That's exactly. I'd like to add that one last point is don't do too much, because you see this across the globe, is that gambling companies are competing on advertising, and consumers get fed up with the number of advertising. So
that's especially the story of Sweden.
Exactly.
When on Channel 4 everything is about advertising for gambling products. And people hate it.
Yeah, and in comes politicians who say, well, my constituents don't want gambling advertising, let alone it has no effect on gambling addiction or this is what should be prevented.
So underage, sensible advertising, the volume discussion. I'm sure we'll hear the word advertising more today. Next question from an anonymous person. Are there evaluation moments built in the new state treaty? If so, when?
Yes, there's it said that the treaty and the development must be evaluated. I don't know whether I recall it properly, maybe after 3 years or so, but there is a time frame which says we will review.
Okay. More questions coming up here. I'm not sure to what that referred to. You mentioned that research say advertising has little effect. Does that cover the much more targeted online advertising? I'm not sure.
In principle, it's both, but if you look at the advertising that is being carried out, most of it nowadays has to do with online. So the focus is on online. It's very simple as well.
And the effectiveness, okay, good. Last question maybe here for this panel, then we've concluded the first part of this morning here. How will these providers of the new virtual slots be called, by the way? Will it be online Spielhallen?
Spielhallen means arcade gaming halls. And I love this question, by the way, because it's a very intelligent one. Of course, the category is virtual slot machines. So you're operators of virtual slot machines, and avoid naming yourself online casino, because that is the other group, the other vertical. I like this question because if you look at the product, you can compare the virtual slots to the arcade gaming halls in comparison to the online casinos and the full format casinos, which are prohibited, to the bricks and mortar casinos offerings. The latter one is the full format without those restrictions, and this is playing in a little, restricted environment like in an arcade gaming hall. I think it's almost the same format, with some differences. And so far, this is a very, very, very intelligent question to close this panel with. Thank you.
And with this, I think we should conclude this session here with quite a bit of information here to digest. Next up, we have a coffee break. We resume in 30 minutes, but not without a big applause for the panel that did amazing here this morning. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Blijf even zitten. Please stay seated.